Just as this season ends, an infamous Brig OTP takes up the 4th and 7th spots on the ladder. And of course, if you take a look at his profile, it's just one brown strip of Brigitte playtime. So let's take a look at a very high profile game featuring not 1, not 2, but 3 seasoned Overwatch pros, being Ultraviolet, Infected, who I've mentioned before, and RuPaul, who's playing on an alt account. The first thing to note is the lack of flankers against the enemy comp. Against dive heroes like Tracer, Sombra or Winston, Brig can traditionally get value by staying close to her other supports and flailing the flankers away. However, in this game, the lower mobility of Torb Cassidy is both a good and bad thing. It's good in that Brig doesn't have to play Five Nights at Freddy checking for flankers 24/7, but it does mean the Brig has to eventually close the gap and brawl, which can be pretty scary to do against a Mauga who can basically one-shot you with Stomp. So how do you walk up against a Mauga? Well, you need to look for triggers or advantages that allow you to walk. These can be HP, ultimates, positional, cooldown or numbers based. Numbers can just mean you get a free pick, which is exactly what happens here, but notice how Mace is still walking away from the Mauga because he still has Stomp. Once Mace hits the whip and the Mauga stomps out, then you can see him start to walk up, whipping the Torb away while capping the points. This bit is very important though. Mace decides to keep walking, but he chooses to swing wide around the corner. How many Brig players do you know would have just kept walking around the corner in front of the Mauga? The reason this is important is that it keeps distance away from the Mauga, which you can count as a positional advantage, making it harder for Infected to hit that all-important Stomp. Now to be honest, Mace probably should have bashed out earlier, but importantly, he bashes out to a piece of cover, using the black cab to juke Infected, who's probably a little frustrated, leaving a Brig on low HP. After some tactical resets by his diva, he's now got Rally to enter this fight. Again, look at the sheer amount of distance Mace has from Infected.
That's quite big.
This makes it super easy to dodge that Mauga Stomp and respond with Rally. Now this fight does become pretty messy, but I want you to focus on 2 things. Firstly, Mace never bashes until the very end because he knows that bash is his main escape card. Secondly, look at how aggressive Mace pushes up and why. He actually goes past the Mauga to swing on the backline, and he's able to do this because of that orbital ray, but also because Infected is fully focused on trying to melt the diva. This is what some coaches like to call juggling aggro, where one player takes a ton of aggression off another player by playing aggressively themselves, typically for short periods. We saw this a bit earlier too, as Mace takes the aggression off his diva by bashing the Mauga and pushing up aggressively. This works especially well with Zarya, which is the tank swap we see on second point, and you can see a very obvious case of this. The Brig takes aggression off his Zarya by pushing up with Bubble, and it's only for short periods as Mace immediately bashes back out once the bubble is close to breaking. Now I do have to talk about repair pack usage because it gets overlooked a ton. There's 3 fairly simple uses. To either pack aggressive teammates who are usually DPS heroes, to pack your other supports when they're taking aggression, or just packing for general ult charge when nobody's taking too much aggro. Again, considering there's no flankers, it's gonna be that first or third usage we'll see the most of. We can see that first and most important use quite clearly as Mace packs his Pharah twice, which if he didn't do, it's certain that the Cassidy wins that duel. After contributing to that pick, he and his team clear the Mauga, again swinging wide from the corner to avoid the Stomp. He does that third type of pack usage on his Zarya, who's taking a mediocre amount of aggro, and he does so again at the beginning of next fights. His remaining packs are onto his Zarya, who's taking a ton of aggression in the enemy Ray, alongside his Pharah, who's low HP while in Barrage. I do want to bring up how important it is to protect your other support though, which we see here towards the end of the game, as Infected is on the ball, RuPaul is on Kiriko, and there's a Genji on the field too. Needing to retreat back, Mace packs his Juno a total of 4 times, taking his Juno from 7 HP all the way to full in a matter of seconds. Anyways, the rest of second point is fairly uneventful, barring an interesting cage by Infected, pulling absolutely nobody, just like my poor game on Hinge. And the second we go to defense, the enemy team do go a full dive comp. To make matters worse, his team basically auto lose the first point, giving almost 6 minutes for the enemy team to attack seconds.
It's not looking good, Bev.
But of course, Mace isn't gonna let that happen. The two most important things in this situation is being in a position to easily help your backline, specifically your Widow, and actually having enough packs to support them. In this example, the Widow grapples straight to her backline. The Widow grapples straight to her backline when under pressure, allowing Mace to immediately send 2 packs to keep the Widow alive. He then whipshots the nano boosted Winston away, eventually walking with the zone ray and getting another boop onto infected. But we're not done there. He ends up sending an extra 5 repair packs to his Widow while the Winston primals and tries his absolute best to kill her. Unfortunately, for infected, the healing is too much, with the tables now being turned if you look at the ult economy. I won't lie, it does obviously help when your Widow just gets pick after pick after pick, but his Widow would never be alive to get those picks in the first place without a competent Brig. I think now is the perfect time to talk about whipshots too. Against the Malga comp, or frankly most ground tanks that don't have a shield, you'll see the majority of Brigs whipshot the enemy tank to trigger Inspire. Against this version of dive though, whipshot is mainly used for displacements. You can see Mace displace infected out of his own bubble, which encourages him to use primal earlier, alongside displacing the Winston looking for a jump and the Cassidy looking for an angle. This stuff isn't groundbreaking, but it is fundamental. If there's squishy dive heroes, like Tracer, Genji or an Echo, hitting the whip on them is even more important due to their lower HP. You can see Mace get a really nice whip shot on the Echo, which boops her out of beam range. Mace did tell me that his playstyle on Brig is really aggressive, so how does he manage to put it off safely? Well, I need to talk about engaging versus baiting. Engaging basically means to go in first, typically using cooldowns like Malga Stomp or most ultimates in the game. Baiting is the opposite, often meaning to go second. Basically, you're gonna absorb the enemy team's engage. But how do you actually do that? Well, we've seen earlier that one way is through distance, because you give yourself enough time to escape those cooldowns like a Malga Stomp. The other way is through frontline pressure, which is what we see here with the Brig frontlining with that Zarya bubble. This baits the Malga into thinking he can engage and punish the Brig, but in reality, he hasn't got enough HP to do so. Mace has the rally to punish the Malga, and the rest of his team have immense spam damage to punish anyone who walks in the room. If the Malga team actually want to engage properly, their DPS need to go heroes like Genji, Venture, and even Tracer, as they all have high burst damage and mobility to punish the Brig for doing this. And that's kinda why Mace gets away with this very baity, tongue-in-cheek playstyle. Of course, Mace doesn't just bait the entire time. If his Zarya has Grav, that gives him permission to play super aggro and engage on the Grav. The timing of this is key. You can see here that initially, nobody looks at the Brig even though she's directly behind them, because they're all busy looking at the Zarya who just grabbed them. You ideally want to engage about half a second after your tank engages. In this instance, the Zarya catches 3, and you can see that initially, the Cassidy looks at the Zarya instead of the Brig because of that perfect engage timing. As a result, Mace catches a Zarya bubble to absorb that cast nade, allowing him to swing onto 3 people, while Rack Attack gets no value from that orbital ray. Anyways, that's it for the video. Make sure to binge watch this playlist and to also check out my coaching in the description if you're interested. Until next time.